Hello, I'm the Dark Master, and welcome back to the Kirby Right Back at You Retrospective. In today's video, we shall be covering the second episode, a Blockbuster Battle, or as the original Hoshino Kabi anime called it, "Oh no! The Search for the Soldier's Home!" In the last episode, we had Tiff wanting Kirby to live in Cappy Town due to his ship being shot down by King Dedede. This episode continues that plotline. Funny because many people mistakenly believe this anime is purely episodic. I guess most just don't pay attention to such things. It's a shame really, but let's not dilly-dally and start the episode review. The episode opens with King Dedede and Escargoon watching Kirby play with Tuff and his friends. These friends are a trio of Cappy kids. As always, let's go over them before continuing the plot as they are new episodes. Let's start with Honey. Honey is the smallest and the youngest of the trio. Honey, as she's called in Japanese, as a character is pretty simple, just a minor character. While she often goes along with her friends, she often illustrates the most innocence, as she hopes her parents don't catch them. She has like a sort of crush on the second Cappy Cake, Spikehead. Overall, Honey is just a minor character voiced by KZ Rogers. Spikehead is the second Cappy Kid. Ironically, in Japan, his name is Iroh, similar to the next character. Spikehead Japanese name comes from the beginning of a word that means color and flower blooming. The most outspoken and brave of the children. This fact will be relevant later in the series. He is voiced by Amy Brebarn. Third and final of the trio is Iroh. No, not that one. This one lacks an H at the end of his name. In Japan, his name is Hohei. Also a character, he presents himself as a cooler kid, but is really quite immature and childish at times. He can be quite temperamental at times, going into tantrums and whines if he doesn't get his way. Ironically, of all the kids, he has the most character development in the series. In these early episodes, he was a bully around Kirby, but eventually they become friends. For me, that gives Iroh a bit more depth than the other two. Jim Napoleano, you did a good job voicing and playing this minor character. Now back to the plot. King Dedede, annoyed, wants to deal with Kirby before he gets settled in the area. Which, you have to kind of ask, why did he wait until this point? But it's safe to say only about a day has passed since the last episode, so I guess you could say it hasn't been that long.
Well, King Dedede, if you want my opinion, who wants your opinion?
Well, that kind of encapsulates my view on whenever Red Eye, Jack Saint, Taxon, Steve Shogs, the Utah Outcast band from the Drunken Peasants podcast, Movie Blob, or Underhaven speak. After ignoring Escargoon's opinion, rightfully so, might I add, Dedede walks over to his throne and calls the NME sales guy.
Welcome back to Nightmare Enterprises' online monster site, King Dedede. As you know, we offer a full line of powerful monsters.
Okay, so I think it's time to address one of the biggest complaints of the anime outside the, issue with Kirby not speaking. That being the designs of many of the original monsters. From watching all 100 episodes, I'd argue that really only applies to the minor back background characters. But even then, I find something interesting about all of them. In this shot, we see a Monster Inc. reject, a small greenish generic knight, a sea urchin, a dude with some mad facial hair, a four-armed ninja, a witch ghost, a raccoon creature, and a living onion. The king is unimpressed and reminds the sales guy of Octagon's previous failure. To this, the salesman assures the king that the displayed monsters have been given new training for increased attack power to deal with Kirby. To demonstrate themselves, the monsters beat the ever-loving poop out of the sales guy. I guess even in this corporation, they hate PR, guys. Most of the monsters are the same size, and as such, the king remains unimpressed. Which is, understandable. I mean, they don't really look all that great. The king then proclaims,
They look like rejects to me. I need something strong enough to get rid of that Kirby for good.
After the intro, we then cut to a more close-up view of Kirby and friends playing jump rope. And here, we learn not even the kids like King Dedede. You gotta really wonder how King Dedede stays in power in the first place, or even got it. Seriously, listen to these lyrics and how politically incorrect they are.
DD, 2 and 2 and 2 is 6. He weighs the same as the ton of bricks.
Anyway, Kirby tries to jump rope only to get hit in the face by the rope. It hurts, of course, I know from experience. Everyone laughs at him except Tiff, who makes a salient point about how Kirby should be learning to fight. Then clouds form and it starts to rain, and everyone runs inside to stay dry. Everyone except Kirby runs to the mayor's house, while Kirby takes a more novel approach, climbing into a tree and hiding in an occupied nest where we meet Tokkori, the worst character in the anime, full stop. This character is horrifyingly, annoyingly irritating in nearly all scenes he's in. Plus, his name is unchanged from the original anime and is basically the Japanese word for a liquor bottle, Tokkori, which is what you're going to need after you listen to him. You know what else has changed, though? Every time he shows up in a scene, there's an off-key fiddle in the background. So it just grates on my ears. Also, he speaks the Cajun accent, and I'll tell you, he is way dumber than most Southerners, I can tell you that much. Seriously, he's garbage. Anyway, he calls Kirby a pinko and kicks him out. Tiff and her brother call him out for being a rude host, but he tells them to find a different home to stay in. And this will become the main plotline of the episode. Right on time, the mayor's wife, Hannah, opens the window right above the children. Tiff asks her for assistance, to which Hannah agrees to Tiff's request. However, once Tiff asks if Kirby can stay, let's just say the mayor's wife has a less than pleased response.
You're such a kidder.
Yeah, so last episode's dinner really traumatized the poor lady, so she politely declines. Then we transition to Tiff asking a brand new character who I'll discuss now. This is Chef Kawasaki. He's one of the few non-Cappies in Cappy Town and is voiced by Maddie Blaustein, who does a good job in the role. Despite being the only chef in the area, apparently his food is garbage and is described as bland at best and terrible at worst. To most people, except Kirby. Kirby likes it. Also, he comes from Kirby Superstar, and in that game he's just a mini-boss, but here he's a full-blown character, and that's quite interesting. Also in the scene, we see one of the first major cosmetic changes of the anime. In the original Japanese version, there are Japanese katakana symbols on the restaurant, much like Dedede's tank. These have been digitally airbrushed out in the American dub. Anyway, it's not really a big negative on the episode. Anyway, Kawasaki, of course, is a little bit hesitant, citing Kirby's lack of experience. He also asks Tiff, why can't Kirby live in the castle? To which she answers,
King Dedede hates Kirby.
of course, you may find this type of dialogue to be too on the nose. After all, we as the audience know Dedede hates Kirby. But you see from the character's perspective, that Kawasaki doesn't know that. And that's enough to get him to like Kirby. I wonder if I could get away with murder if I just said that I didn't like the king. Anyway, we then cut to the restaurant where Kirby is being worked hard by Kawasaki as a waiter. And can I just say, Kirby's quite efficient.
At least Kirby has a place to stay.
It doesn't seem right for a warrior to work as a waiter.
Okay, tough. If you didn't want Kirby to be a waiter, why take him to the one sole chef in town? Anyway, the king rolls up in his tank and barges in. Kawasaki, regardless, tries to be polite, only to be pushed aside by Dedede and Escargoon. Yeah, this king's a jerk. While he looks in the menu, we get to take a look at the photo of Kawasaki in the background. Do you know in the original anime it was a kanji symbol? Here's the funny thing, in later episodes they don't even change into symbol. 4Kids is really inconsistent with how it changes anime. Anyway, King Dedede makes his order.
Yeah. I'll have the Chateaubriand for 2 for my entree, and I'll start off with some snails.
Don't have snail.
Okay, that is just disgusting. Not the Chateaubriand. That tastes perfectly fine. I've tried it. But the fact that he would want to eat snails. Not only are snails absolutely disgusting, but he literally lives in a world where there are sentient snails and one of them works for him. Would this be like if I ate a human being in front of another human being? I wonder, do they sell penguin meat here? Anyway, this is just so weird. Kirby is sent to serve the king, but Dedede and Escargoon intentionally make the poor puffball fall over, flip, and all sorts of other mistakes until Kawasaki has no choice but to fire and roll Kirby out of the restaurant. Of course, Kawasaki knows the king's responsible, but in his own words,
That may be true, Tough, but I can't fire the king.
of course you could just not fire Kirby. No one's making you. You're the only chef in town. You're literally a monopoly. To rub it in, Dedede then drives his car so that he gets mud in the face of Kirby. Man, the king is a jerk. But an even bigger one is Tokkori, who we cut to plotting with Dedede. Now, in the original anime, I will say Tokkori's justifications are a bit stronger. Okay, so in the original, apparently Tokkori is an absolute moron and thinks Kirby wants to take his nest. But in the new anime for America, he just hates Kirby. Either way, he's an absolute douche and even annoys Dedede and Escargoon as he flies off to stifle Kirby's new home quest. Now, there are 2 whole entire scenes cut from the original anime for the dub. The reasons for their removal will become obvious in a moment, but how about we discuss them now? The first scene takes place in Bookham's police station, where the gang asks if Kirby can stay. Bookham's answers that the only bed available is in the cell. Speaking of, in this scene, we have the debut of Doron. He's just a typical thief who keeps to himself and doesn't speak that much. We'll talk about him later, but there's a whole episode with him in it. His name is in fact a pun on Dorobo, the Japanese word for thief. Anyway, Kirby is sleeping on the table as the babies do, you know. And can I ask, why are there so many guns here? I mean, seriously, there's only one person that regularly commits crimes. And do you really need 4 shotguns and a machine gun? Oh yeah, Tokkori drops said machine gun on Kirby, somehow making it go off, and just look at how many bullets are in this one gun. My gosh, Kirby, just put the gun down. Seriously, how many bullets are in that gun? Also, how many bullets does it take to destroy a building with that standard caliber? I mean, seriously, look at that. That's just impressive in how grossly unneeded that sort of gun is. That's amazing. Yeah, this level of violence with hyper-realistic weaponry seems a bit much for a kid's show, but what if I told you the next scene is even worse? Hell, well, let's talk Mr. Booze. Yes, literal alcohol. Here we meet another new character, though not in the American dub. This is Samo. He runs the local beer and is also voiced by Mike Pollock, which is just amazing. He's snooping as usual with an Irish accent and sells alcohol. No wonder this scene was cut from this episode, for we see Kirby first with a mixed drink and a beer keg. Tokkori is, of course, there to ensure Kirby fails. And can I just say, I'm pretty sure beer doesn't just explode if you shake it. Pretty sure if that was the case, then no one would ever ship beer anywhere. Going back to the English dub, we get to see the last two places Kirby tries to go to. The first being what is my favorite of all the Cappies in the show, that being Professor Curio. This guy is an archaeologist who has an antique shop/museum. Much like real life, it is often vandalized and underfunded. Voiced by Maddie Blaustein, Curio's name comes from the Latin root word meaning inquisitiveness, which is a reflective description of his personal nature. Also, Curio is a rare and interesting item, referring to the artifacts he searches for. Curio does state that he needs an assistant, and one that is careful. You see, Toki then throws one of the artifacts onto Kirby, who he only notices just as he's about to fall off. It amazes me that he doesn't pay more attention for such valuable objects. Also, might I suggest for Curio to put a glass box around your artifacts and fossils just so that people can't shoplift them? Of course, Curio reacts to the destruction of this priceless artifact like all archaeologists do, by fainting. Hope that old guy didn't hurt his back falling on the wooden floor. Next, we go to the final Cappy the gang tries to take Kirby to, that being Gus, voiced by Eric Stewart. He runs the only gas station in town. Of course, only 2 people in town own cars, so I guess he wouldn't get much business. All seems to go well until Teef tempts fate.
There could be trouble if he goes pushing the wrong buttons.
Oh, Kirby wouldn't do that.
Okay, first, what kind of gas station has a button that causes self-destruction? 2, why is it so low on the ground? Anyone could bump it with their feet and have it. Oddly, the button is an anti-Kirby button in the original anime, while in the dub, it's made green. Of all changes, this has to be the most bizarre and small. Were they afraid of anti-Kirby bigotry in the United States? I don't know. I've never seen a real-life Kirby in my life. They all look the same to me. Also, everyone survives that explosion. Quite impressive. Gus is understandably upset at having his business exploded. Now we cut back to Tokai, who is upset that they're asking if Kirby can live with him. Okay, first of all, maybe you shouldn't have ruined Kirby's chances with the other people. And if you hadn't done that, they wouldn't be asking you in the first place, you dumb bird. At least we get to meet a much better bird, Ku from Kirby's Dream Land 2. He too is voiced by Eric Stewart. He serves as a wise owl that helps Kirby out. Despite being his mentor, even he can't convince the stubborn Tokai to let Kirby slay for a bit. Ku then says perhaps another tree would work, which inspires Tiff to make a brand new house for Kirby. Holding no ill will, the Cappies begin building in a tree a house for Kirby to stay in. Here we see another short cameo from an animal friend, this time Rick the hamster. His short appearance is marked by a didgeridoo and an Australian accents provided by Andrew Ranwells. It really makes him a decent cameo and a much better Australian than Red Eye. He writes Kirby when he wanders off, which is kind of a nice thing to do, you know. Tokai reports his failures to the king, who is not too pleased to have Kirby firmly establishing a home in Dreamland. Realizing his more subtle, in air quotes, tactics have failed, Dedede decides it's time to get a second monster. The opening of the monster station was a bit more complex than last time. But seriously, what does that umbrella even do? The enemy sales guy tells the king of a special monster they have for him. Dedede doesn't ask what it is and just orders it. Kind of like pre-buyers and a lot of other consumers of video games. Let's just say what comes out does tend to subvert expectations a little bit. And while that may not be very impressive to you, his name is Blocky. And after the king scoffs, the sales guy shows off his true form. Okay, so Blocky as an enemy, unlike Octagon, actually originally appeared in the games, dating all the way back to Kirby's Dream Land 2. In the games, he's a brick with no arms or accessories, and shifts between brownish and gray. In the anime, he has arms, a sumo headdress, and belt. I don't know if I really like the redesign all that much. The arms are unneeded, and they kind of just stick out alongside the rest of his admittedly poor CGI body. What's even weird is that we'll see the older design later when he splits up into multiple different blocks. I'm really happy that when they brought him back in later games, they left the arms off. Also, did you know Blocky had an appearance in the original pilot that was way more accurate? What happened? Why did they change it between the pilot and the actual series? Kinda odd. Anyway, to prove his worth, Blocky does a body slam, destroying the teleporter beneath him. Did Dedede just fart? Also, we learned that the castle is at the very least 36 floors high, which is huge compared to the average castle. Also, thanks to his own incompetence, King Dedede and Escargoon end up under where the monster breaks through, leading to the monster almost crushing him. In fact, if it wasn't for the fact that the floor and the 36th floor is particularly thick, it is likely that Blocky would have killed both the king and his minion. Seriously, he should have just waited in the elevator to see Blocky stop. We then cut to Tiff, who is about to reveal Kirby's new house, where they apparently trapped Kirby in a sphere just to surprise him. Seems a bit extreme, and I'm pretty sure Kirby would be kind of freaked out, but Kirby's happy just to see food. The mayor remarks how good it is that the house he made is decent, while Bookums is just happy that he's out of the town. Which, I mean, I can't blame him. I mean, after the destruction of his police station as well as the gas station, I wouldn't be particularly happy if the house was in town. Unfortunately, the fun is ruined as King Dedede arrives to break up what he calls an illegal gathering. Who is this guy, the mayor of New York City? Anyway, King Dedede destroys not only the house, but the tree itself, much to Kirby's dismay, ramming this tree, causing its own unfortunate demise. Then the king introduces Blocky. At first unimpressed by the admittedly rather sad block form, Blocky then transforms, knocking back Tiff, Tuff, and Kirby. At least the demon beast is kind enough to knock Tiff and Tuff away using his sumo stance so that he only crushes Kirby. And by gosh, does he flatter Kirby. I mean, seriously, he smashes him 5 times in a row, and he ends up a thin sheet. Tiff and her brother unflatter Kirby somehow, while Tiff encourages Kirby to try and repel Blocky. Unaware that, of course, in the video games you can't inherit bosses and sub-bosses. He nearly inhales everyone, even a random lizard that I have no idea why they put there. I kind of wonder, what would a lizard Kirby be like? Would he have been able to defeat Blocky? Who knows? Anyway, Blocky is unfazed, of course, due to his CGI dense mass. Kirby eventually loses his breath. Ha ha! Get it? While Meta Knight observes Kirby's failure from behind a tree, Tuff notices a problem.
Kirby can't handle a heavy weight.
Actually, Dedede here is correct, as we'll soon see. Kirby tries once again to inhale the block, but is knocked away by Blocky, who is still unimpressed and stomps Kirby again. Tiff this time interjects, saves Kirby, and flings him away like a frisbee. She almost got crushed, and that would have been quite sad, but luckily she survives. Unfortunately, Kirby lands in what is probably the worst place to be, Tokai's nest. The bad bird tells Kirby to get out of his nest. That is interrupted by Blocky, who can move at a pretty fast rate, which is a bit inconsistent in the episode. Anyway, he knocks down the tree before Kirby can leave, which rightfully annoys Tokkori, and then he calls out Dedede for his betrayal, to which the king simply shoots him away point blank with a cannon that should have killed him. So Tokkori is so annoying even the king is tired of him, which I mean, I'm tired of Tokkori too. Then we see that the trio of villains have lost Kirby, no doubt thanks to Tokkori, to which Meta Knight overhears. Turns out Tiff, Tuff, and Kirby escaped to a rocky part of the beach with many sea cliffs. They then ask themselves how Kirby could have failed to inhale such a beast, to which of course Meta Knight knows the answers of, because he knows the answers of everything.
Your opponent is made of a super high density matter.
Super high density? What's that mean?
It is too heavy to be sucked up by
Yeah, no kidding, Meta Knight. The fact that Kirby can't inhale it and that it crushes people tends to lead credence to the idea that he has dense mass. Though I will say that they do defeat Blocky using his advice, so we'll say it at least serves somewhat of a story point, which I'll admit is good advice. Also, this scene, despite being short, does indeed help develop Meta Knight's character, for even Tuff is curious as to Meta Knight's background. Unfortunately for you all, we gotta wait until the 4th episode to get any of that lore. So Tiff decides to start training Kirby for his next encounter with Blocky, which will be soon. Okay, so I do have one issue with this short training sequence. Kirby here inhales rocks, but doesn't get a copy ability. Not to spoil anything, but this is rather inconsistent with both the later parts of this episode and the series as a whole. Anyway, Tuff then tries to get Kirby to inhale a large rock, which Kirby fails to do so, unfortunately. But that does inspire Tiff with a strategy we'll soon see.
I know I heard the sound of sucking over here somewhere.
So apparently Dedede heard the sucking, which is like, dude, how loud was that sucking? Or was he just close by when it started? Of course, Tiff yells at King Dedede that they'll never kick out Kirby, and to which Dedede simply tells Blocky to walk over and stomp him. Of course, once he gets close to the edge, Tiff tells Kirby to begin inhaling, and Dedede at first scoffs, but that's what Tiff wanted. You see, Kirby then inhales Blocky, but because of Blocky's own weight and gravity and the overall fragility of the ledge, he starts losing his balance and indeed begins falling down, much to the king's surprise. A rather interesting strategy to use the monster's own mass against itself.
Their opponent's weight was its strength. Now they have turned it to their advantage.
Why, thank you, Meta Knight, for that much needed commentary. Literally, I just said that. Also, I just love how Blocky's normally stoic face becomes like absolutely mortified as he's about to be eaten. Out of desperation to avoid getting eaten, Blocky splits into 4 smaller versions of himself, of which Kirby eats one. Here we are introduced to the next copy ability of the show, Stone Kirby. Stone Kirby actually somewhat resembles his superstar appearance, though his skin tone isn't brown as it is more like stonish gray. I will say, the transformation is a bit weaker than the Fire Kirby, as the samurai helmet just kind of appears out of the blue, with albeit some sort of spectacle, and then Kirby just puts it on. It's not quite as flashy as the Fire version. Once again, Kirby's music here is just fantastic. Also in the original anime, apparently Kirby said Stone Kirby as it's transformed. I'm kind of happy they cut that out because honestly, I think Kirby works best as someone who doesn't talk that much, and it would have ruined the transformation, honestly. Tiff and Tuff rejoice, but not for long, as Dedede properly states that only 1/4 of Blocky was inhaled. The other three are smaller versions of himself, and they revitalize to attack Kirby. Now, I want to point this out, how these smaller designs are actually way more game accurate, and honestly, they look pretty good. Like, I really wish they hadn't, changed the look of Blocky. But like, yeah, it's kind of weird. Like, there's a redesign and an original. It's kind of weird. Like, why would you build two separate models instead of just one? I mean, it's cool. Despite that, the trio then beat Kirby up to a poop, and they are rather athletic for what they're supposed to be, which is like solid rock blocks. Fed up, Kirby decides to transform into his stone form, which is like a pink version of the giant stone combination from Kirby 64 with crystal shards. Ironically, the tables have turned and Blocky is now the weakling, as the trio, despite the king's protest, is simply unable to really hurt Kirby. I mean, they're simply too small and weakened, only ending up with a migraine. I mean, seriously, look at that face when that guy tries to hit Kirby. It just looks painful.
Kirby copied Blocky! Yeah, now Kirby's a rock star warrior!
Oh man, that rock star pun was just so amazing tough. Kirby gets his payback when he crushes the trio of Blockies into rubble, much to the cheer of Tiff and Tuff. Strangely, even Tokai cheers, though I think that's a little more to the fact that Blocky destroyed his home than about actually liking Kirby. Seriously, he's just a terrible person, and he's such a vindictive person as well. I mean, it even kind of freaks out the kids if you look at it. Blocky reforms from the shards into his lesser forms, while Kirby wanders off to a rock ledge. Exactly why, I'm not sure. I think it was a plan, as Dedede orders Blocky. Blocky then reforms and begins jumping on top of Stone Kirby, though it's not a winning strategy since Kirby is both immune to him and the ground begins to get rather thin.
You dumb blockhead!
We're sunk and so is he!
You know, Dedede, you told Blocky to attack. Your poor orders are why this happened. Also, can I just say, I can hear the sheer emotion in Escargoon's voice. I really feel like the love only went one way, though. Now we see Kirby and Blocky falling down into the ocean. Stone Kirby turns back to normal, only to run into Kine, causing him to spit out the fourth Blocky. There's so much to say about this one scene, so let's dive in. Firstly, this water is right off the coast. How is it this freaking deep? Seriously, it looks like it's into the abyss. Secondly, we see Kine as a non-speaking cameo. I'll be talking more about him in a later video, but safe it to say, Darren Dumstein did a good job with this character from Dreamland 2. A point of contention, however, is Blocky's ultimate fate. You see, Blocky was one of the few monsters that Kirby didn't destroy, and the first one that we see. Nor was it defeated by him, rather he just sank to the bottom of the sea. From here, there are several hypotheses as to what happened to this monster, and what was his final fate. Let's go over them, and I'll share my take. Firstly, some hold that because we never see him in the rest of the series, that he must have died. The first theory is that he drowned. This has a few flaws. Firstly, these are inorganic life forms and as such may not need to breathe. and in their true form, they lack mouths entirely. While this may possibly be a valid theory for the fourth Blocky, as indeed it did have a mouth, I would argue that it doesn't really account for all of Blocky, and as such is a flawed hypothesis, if at all. A different hypothesis is that all of Blocky's eroded away. Now, at first glance, this seems reasonable. After all, rock is eroded by seawater, and Blocky is made out of rock. However, there are still some severe problems with this theory. Firstly, Blocky is described as being hyperdense, and hyperdense substances erode slower than less dense substances in general. There are exceptions, but seeing as how the specific substance Blocky is made from isn't stated, it would be invalid to assume that it happened to be one of these exceptions. Secondly, as illustrated in the episode, Blocky can heal himself from being broken down, so the whole erosion argument just seems like it wouldn't apply here. He could just heal himself if ever a piece eroded off. Now here's my alternative hypothesis. Blocky simply walked slowly out the ocean to a part of the shore where he can, emerge. And remember that this guy really needs gentle slopes, otherwise he falls back down. So he could not return from the place that he fell. It's likely that he surfaced far away from Capitan on some sort of very smooth incline to a beach. Now what happened after that? Who knows? Away from nightmares and Dedede's evil influences, maybe he went wild. Maybe he inserted himself into the local flora and fauna. It's just one of those loose ends that unfortunately we're never going to get an answer to. Anyway, I think this digression has lasted long enough, but if you have an interesting theory as to what happened to Blocky, leave it down in the description below. Let us continue and wrap up this episode. Kirby swims up to the surface and makes everyone except Dedede happy. Up there, he mourns for his monster, and an escargoon makes a horrible pun.
Well, sire, it just goes to show you shouldn't take your monsters for granted.
In the original anime, Dedede hits escargoon 3 times for that pun. Kind of deserves it, but I guess they cut it just so that it wouldn't be needed, because I can see how it would sort of slow down the scene. Anyway, then we cut to Kirby's new, smaller home, and that is far more game accurate. They go inside to show it to Kirby. Oh, but when he tries to sleep in the bed, it turns out there's somebody already in there, hogging the nice bed from Kirby.
Can't a bird get any peace and quiet in this town? Tokkori!
Tokkori, what's wrong with you? Firstly, you don't let Kirby stay with you in the beginning, thereby triggering this entire plot. Then you work with King Dedede to, make sure Kirby can't find anywhere to live. Then you steal his new house? Are you serious? First off, there's already a tree next to it, so you can just stay there if you want. It's just horrible. You're just a horrible character, and I can't believe you got an own episode for yourself later on. Luckily, we're nowhere near that episode. At least Kirby finally gets a place to stay, even if it is meant to be a joke place. Also, the episode ends in a joke. Seriously. Ugh. Kirby doesn't deserve to live in a tree.
Well, I guess Kirby got his treehouse after all.
How lovely of a pun. Well, this was quite the second episode indeed. It continues right where the last one left off, and further develops the location and plot around Kirby. Really, so many characters in this episode will get episodes of their own. Even the worst ones. It's interesting how they're introduced here. Of course, we also get Tokkori, even though he did have a cameo in the first episode. He wasn't really in there, and if I hadn't seen the second episode, I might have just assumed he was some random bird. But nope, in this episode he's firmly established as a horribly annoying, rude monster. Also in this episode, we see some of the greatest outright censorship in the series, not counting for a certain other episode we'll get to that was completely banned in the US. Now, some of this censorship is really not that important, and I really only brought it up to be thorough, like the Japanese letters and the restaurant or the sticker being green as opposed to anti-Kirby. But also, 2 whole scenes are removed. Now, to be honest, these scenes depict events that push the borders of a completely child-friendly show. And I admit that they did kind of have to shorten the episode just so it would fit in the time block. But seriously, censorship is such baloney. Like, I really think no kids would have been offended or seriously impacted by seeing Kirby comically shooting a gun or having beer. I mean, that's just silly. Anyway, I'm the Dark Master, and join me next time when I review the 3rd episode in the Kirby Right Back at Ya Marathon. Like and enjoy your day, my friends.
Mr. Booze, Mr. Booze, Mr. Booze, Mr. B-double-O-Z. That sure spells booze. You will wind up wearing tattered shoes if you mess with Mr. Booze. Don't mess with Mr. Booze. Don't mess with Mr.